Welcome to the Creatures Digest. I'm Frank Dietz. On the Creatures Digest, every episode we're going to take a look at one of my favorite films and talk a little bit about why I find these films so enjoyable, and hopefully you will too. Our first film is Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, a real favorite of mine. Universal Studios, released in 1943, starring Lon Chaney as the Wolfman, Larry Talbot. Originally, I understand, they wanted Lon to play both Frankenstein and the Wolfman for this film, but that became logistically difficult, so they brought in Bela Lugosi to play the monster in this film, which was kind of an interesting choice because in Ghost of Frankenstein, the last Frankenstein film, the monster had Igor's brain transplanted into his head. Igor was played by Bela Lugosi, so it made perfect sense, really. But Bela maybe wasn't the best choice to play the monster at his age and at this point. Here we have one of the great openings of a Universal film ever. This is just beautiful. This great crane shot moving along this cemetery set with some ravens glued to some fence posts and a couple of other ravens and some dried leaves. And we have two grave robbers who are coming to steal from the mausoleum of the Talbot family. That's Richardson, the gravedigger, who somehow miraculously survived his murder in the first Wolfman film, back again. But they make a fatal mistake in letting the moonlight fall onto Larry's corpse, and so one of them is killed, the other one runs for the hills. Bobby finds Larry Talbot lying in the street. He's brought to Queen's Hospital, where Dr. Mannering examines him. Larry's not really sure how he got there, but before you know it, the moon rises again, and guess what? The Wolfman is back. Now this is arguably the best werewolf transformation ever. It's certainly the best one in the Universal films. It's just almost seamless. It's so beautiful, and a real tribute to John Fulton and Jack Pierce, who were the two makeup and special effect geniuses who created this. Really spectacular work. I can watch it over and over again, and I'm amazed at how beautifully it's done. So Larry is back as the Wolfman, and he's going to hit the road, or hit the streets of wherever this is, Cardiff, I think they call it. So there's Lon, and he does some nice jumping here. I think it's Lon. It looks like Lon. So now he's going to attack the same Bobby who found him in the street, this poor guy. He should have just left him there. This is a pretty brutal attack, though, because this is one of the only times you see the Wolfman actually sort of dig his jaws into somebody's neck. Next morning, Larry wakes up and remembers that he's a werewolf. And can't get anyone to believe him. The inspector here thinks he's nuts, and Larry realizes that he can't die. And that's a problem for him, obviously, because he doesn't want to go on killing people. Mannering calls in some goons to, restrain him, but boy, it takes 3 guys to take down Lon Chaney Jr. I mean, look at him just tossing them around like they're nothing. So Lon hits the road, gets out. There's Moose, who was Lon's dog. And Lon is looking for Mileva, who was the gypsy woman from the original film, Maria Uspenskaya. Her son, Bela, who was played by Bela Lugosi, was the werewolf who attacked and made Larry into a werewolf. So he comes to her for help. She thinks that Dr. Frankenstein might be able to help him be cured of his lycanthropy. So they hit Varsek's bar, and this girl here has doom written all over her. Let's look at that. He's like, yeah, you're next. But Varsek tells them that, unfortunately, Dr. Frankenstein has perished. Up in the castle there in the ruins. He's long gone, so they're bummed out about that. The moon rises again. Look at Mileva. Mileva's like, oh my God, I am so screwed. You're just like, don't run or anything. He's only going to become a dangerous werewolf. We get a nice transformation here as well, next to the tree. It's marvelous. They don't do this anymore. Obviously, we have more interesting kinds of effects. Look, Mileva's like, "Hey, come back, come back." I'm like, "What are you, crazy? What are you going to call the werewolf back?" In the tradition of most Universal films, a body is carried through the town by someone. We got some great shots of the Wolfman, some of the best actually in the whole series. He looks ferocious, and here's shot and a miss. Wolfman pretends that he's been shot, which is pretty smart for a werewolf if you think about it. And he heads into the ruins of the castle while these bunch of idiots, are looking all over the place for him. And he takes a tumble down below the ground and into this ice cavern below the ruins. One of the things I really love about this scene is we get to see the Wolfman in a very different environment than we're used to seeing him, this glacier. I did a painting of this once because I loved it so much. Larry wakes up in the ice wearing shoes, because he must have brought shoes with him, as any good werewolf would do. It's probably a good idea, if you're a werewolf, to bring shoes with you when you're going to go out prowling, because you never know if you're going to end up in a glacier. So, stumbling around the glacier, he comes upon a very interesting find, and that would be the Frankenstein Monster. We're about halfway through the movie, I guess, at this point. And it's not Bela Lugosi, it turns out. It's Eddie Parker, standing in for Lugosi, who, Lugosi was, I think, 60 years old or so at this point, and I'm not sure if it was really a great idea for him to play this character or not, but we'll talk a little bit about that more in a minute. So he frees the monster from the ice and then asks the monster to show him where Dr. Frankenstein kept his records. How the monster would know this is beyond me. But the monster goes to this secret compartment. Lon doesn't find the book, but he does find a picture of Elsa Frankenstein, his daughter, played by this gal. And so Lon goes to meet her, and we have Lionel Atwill thrown in just for good measure, because, you can never go wrong with Lionel Atwill. They can't come to terms about her father's diary, so they go to the Festival of the New Wine, a favorite scene among Universal fans. There is much rejoicing, and it's a musical number set in the middle of this horror movie. Now, here's one of my favorite things. Here's Lon Chaney Jr. doing what he does best, lapel-grabbing. Now, Lon could grab lapels with the best of them, and here he shows just how good he is at it. Poor Larry is upset and becomes even more upset when he discovers that Dr. Mannering has tracked him here. And they discuss murder and such, while Varsek the bartender overhears. There's a lot of overhearing in this movie, by the way. And then Frankie decides to crash the party. So the monster, who, by the way, I should point out, is supposed to be blind. In the original script, the monster was blind because he has Igor's brain put in his head from the last film, and the brain didn't match, and so he ended up being blind. Unfortunately, they decided to edit this film in such a way that it removed all references to that fact, so it does make Bela's performance look somewhat awkward at times. Well, the next morning, they go up to the castle, and Larry introduces the monster to Dr. Mannering and Elsa, who he's actually already met in the last film. And Maliva's just along for the ride. Well, Elsa decides to give up her father's diary, and she shows another secret compartment. Boy, they're just loaded with secret compartments in those days. And they decide what they're going to do is, using Dr. Frankenstein's records, they're going to set up the lab, and actually we get a nice science lesson from Larry here. He tells us all about electricity. They're going to drain the energy from the monster and from Larry at the same time, thereby ending both monsters. However, as often happens in Universal monster movies, the scientist becomes obsessed with seeing the monster at his full power. Happens in almost every one of these films, and he must see Frankenstein's creation at its full power. And so he decides that he's going to do that. Now, this wakes up Elsa, which cracks me up, because you're in a creepy castle with at least two monsters that you're aware of, and you're going to take a nap during all this? It doesn't make any sense to me, but what do I know? So anyway, Mannering starts charging up old Bela. And some nice shots here, actually, of Bela as the electrical charge is shooting through him. Elsa's not happy about this at all. I mean, come on, this was not the plan, right? Right? Not the plan. Never is. But the monster starts a twitching, and he's getting full of electricity. And we have one of the favorite shots from this film by fans is this next shot here. This one where the monster actually looks like he can now see again, as if the power has restored his sight. Varsek sets dynamite at the dam that's up above the ruins of the castle to get rid of all the monsters. The moon rises. There's Gil Perkins, I believe, as the Frankenstein monster, not Bela again. Another nice little last change before the end of the film. The monster goes to attack Elsa. There's a little bit of fighting, but what we really want, what we've been waiting for this whole hour and 6 minutes, whatever it is what's going to happen now, which is the battle. So the Wolfman grabs the monster. The monster drops Elsa like a dirty diaper, and the two go at it. Now, this is some very, very clever editing, really, if you think about it. I mean, the close-ups are of Bela in the makeup. It's kind of hard to tell when it's a stuntman for the Wolfman. I'm sure it was, because they wouldn't want their star to be doing that much. But it seems to me like Lon would be the kind of guy who would insist on doing a lot of his own stunts. That would be something he would take pride in, like his father did, the great Lon Chaney Sr. But there are some cool stunts like this one, which I always loved. The Castle film condensed version, Super 8 version, that was my favorite point when they did that marvelous stunt. And so one more yell at each other and a dive, and the water hits, and it's the last time we see them rolling around in the water as the castle begins to crumble around them, perishing in the destruction, but not really, because we all know that they're just going to come back in the next film, because that's what we did back in the 40s. This was the first of the monster mashes. The next one would be House of Frankenstein, which I'll get to at some point. But once the monsters are dead, we say the end. That's how it works on these movies. And so thanks for joining me on this first episode of the Creatures Digest, and see you next time.